Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of XR Talk Show. Today, I'm going to teach you JavaScript to beginners to intermediate. So, you guys, if you want to learn JavaScript, you are watching the right video. So, I think I'm going to do about an hour. Let's see how far I can go. Yesterday, I was talking about a JavaScript topic about web scripting DOM, about the not list versus HTML collection. And when talking about that, I discussed some other things. Let's go to my JavaScript blog, okay, just to begin with. So this is my web dev blog. You can see my HTML tutorial, CSS tutorial, JavaScript in depth, and so on. And back to my blog. You can go to my blog by just go to XR JavaScript in depth. Just search that, and you'll find my web page. So I'm going to teach. Let's see if I'm live. Okay, I'm live. 2 people watching. So I'm going to teach today JavaScript to kind of beginners. If you never to someone who had at least one programming language experience, if you programmed a little bit, then you can follow. I hope so. So go to today's topic. I'm going to teach JavaScript, and so yesterday I was talking about not list versus HTML collection. This page, it's somewhat advanced. It's very complicated. And when talking about this, then I went on to talk about some other stuff in JavaScript. In particular, why do you have array and array-like object? They are different, and that's a big problem, complexity in JavaScript. So I tried to explain that yesterday. But anyway, so today I'm going to try to teach you JavaScript, to beginners. So let's begin then. Yeah, JavaScript. Let's begin. Okay, first of all, JavaScript Basic. First, okay, there are 2 parts to do web programming. Web programming, including programming your smartphone, Android phone, or Apple iOS phone. You have, JavaScript is critically important. It's almost like the number one important language when you want to do any sort of web programming. Now, JavaScript, in order to do that, to learn how to create a web application, interactive single-page web application, you have to know JavaScript, the language, but also you have to know HTML, you have to know CSS. You actually do have to know. So, HTML, CSS, then you have to know JavaScript, the language. Then you have to know DOM scripting. So why? So HTML and CSS. Anyway, I'm not going into detail about that. I assume you probably know what HTML and CSS is about. But what's the difference between JavaScript and DOM? You see, JavaScript is just a programming language. For example, like Perl, Python. You can print prime numbers, 1 to 100. You can print, or even numbers, and do things like that. But if you are going to create a desktop application using, for example, Python or Java or C++, you need something else other than the programming language. You need, libraries to draw, buttons, menus, windows on your screen. And that part is very different from the programming language, because you learn Python, you know how to create an object, classes, list, dictionary, data types. You know how to compute numbers, 1 plus 1, or and deal with strings, and all these things. But they has nothing to do with how do you create a graphical user interface, mouse click, things like that. So in order to do that, you need to know the basically. So that's the other part of the thing. If you program for Windows operating system, you need to know the Windows system. How do you call the system functions to create a window? How do you create a button? How do you create a menu? What happens when people click on the menu? So you need this part, and this part is also very complex. It's fairly complex, and it's also different on different platform. For example, on Windows, if you're gonna write a Windows application, suppose you are using Python. You learn Python, but you also have to know the Windows platform. How do you actually do that? On Mac, it's a different, Mac libraries, Mac OS system calls and all that to do that. On Linux, it's another, again, it's different. On cell phone, iOS or Android, again, it's different. So so you need to know JavaScript, the language. But the other part about drawing, menus, windows, buttons, those part is about that is what DOM is about. So for example, let's see. I have some examples. So let's go to some examples. I'm going to show you some basic web application. Okay, so you go to my Excel website, website. Then you can go to Unicode, and why not? Let's go to keyboard. Oh, actually, and let's go to play Chinese chess. You see, here is some examples of web application. They are written in JavaScript. So, for example, we have here is Chinese chess. I can start to play against the computer. We we are trying to play a speed chess. So that's an example of web application. Now that's pretty bad. I'm gonna lose a piece. Should have known that. Well, too bad. So if you are watching, you have any questions or comments or opinions, just post. Okay, I love to see your comments. The more comment is better for my channel as well. So you like my stuff, uh, you know, keep the comment going. So this is a example of application, written in JavaScript. You need to know the JavaScript language well. Then you need to know, in this case, is DOM. How do you create these, pieces, these graphics? How do you manipulate, move them to different positions? Then you have menus here, play against human or computer. These menus widgets. These are called widgets. So that this part is DOM. So you need to know JavaScript, and you need to DOM. You need to understand DOM. So this is one example. In fact, if you are actually working with JavaScript every day, most of your time, your concern, the time you spend to know how to do things is actually about DOM. It's less about JavaScript language. And similarly for other applications, if you're gonna write a desktop application to plot math graphics, and you can rotate it in 3D, that's a similar situation. You have to know the Python language, but most of the time you are probably spending dealing with the, how do you control the mouse, how do you control the, with the environment, the system you are programming. So that's one example of JavaScript application. Let me just show you another couple, because I wrote them, so I like to demonstrate them. So there is, let's go to Xali keyboard layout, and there is this interactive character frequency counter. So as I type, you can see the bar chart changes. They are calculating the frequency of each letters I type. You see, so this is another example of JavaScript web application. You need to know JavaScript, then you need to know the DOM. How do you draw this bar chart? In this case, it's actually SVG. The technology is SVG, part of the web technology. So that's another example of web application. Then I have this Unicode example. Let's search for water. WATER. So it shows all Unicode character names that contains the word water. Let's try fire. FIRE. Okay. Now here is all the Unicode characters whose name contains the word fire. Now let's see if there's a Unicode character that contains whose name contains both the word fire and water. Okay, there's no such. Let's try earth. See what comes up. Okay, so you got several characters about earth, including emoji. So that's another example of Unicode. I mean not Unicode, the JavaScript. So you can go to my website. I go to my website and I look. You see, here is the JavaScript code. You know. So anyway, we kind of digressed into JavaScript applications, examples of them. But let me begin to teach JavaScript. So let me read the comment. Good morning, Sean Panzera. Just wanted to say thanks for the beginner's guide approach to JavaScript. Thank you. Now again, like if I'm too verbose, just tell me to get on. Just comment, comment. So yeah, let's begin. So first of all, JavaScript. The first thing you need to do is how do you start to type? Let's say you want to do one plus one. Okay. So you just go to a browser, any browser, Safari, Chrome, any browser. Then typically in the menu, you can select developer tools. Sometimes it's called console. Okay, then the browser will show this console. Then you can just start to type JavaScript. Let's say 1 plus. I have 1 plus 2 there. Let's say 1 plus 3. Okay, and that's JavaScript. Let's say let x equals to 5. Okay, then x plus 9 is 14. Okay, and let y equals to an array. Okay, so let's type an array 1 2 3. And y is now a array, 3 elements, 1 2 3. So this is how you evaluate JavaScript. Okay, I think at this rate, we will not be going anywhere. Okay, already 13 minutes, 5 people watching. So, but anyway, because that's okay. Because when I have a specific goal, then I start to have a pressure. Oh, I have to do this well. Then things don't go well. So let me just random rant is okay. So anyway, I want to show you my website. Okay, so you go to JavaScript in depth. Then the first section here, JavaScript Basics, that teaches you the basics. Now, of course, if you are the type of person who wants to not waste time watching videos, you can just read my tutorial. It's one page by page. It's concise, condensed information you can read at your leisure. At your phase, whatever speed you learn things. So anyway, the first thing we learned is that how do you actually evaluate JavaScript. So you just go to a browser. You start this JavaScript console in the tools, and I have actually an example here. I show you in detail how to use browser console. That's basically what we just covered. Okay, that's one way to do it. But another way to do it is you want to go to install Node.js. Okay, you go to a website Node.js. Okay, you go to the Node.js website. Then you download their binary. So you go to Node.js website. There's a download for Windows, Mac, or Linux. Okay, in my case it's a Mac. You can just download it. Once you download it, you will have a binary a program called Node. You can call in command line. So for example, Node. Let's say Node help. Okay, that's not help. Let's go into Node then. So now we are in Node. Let's magnify. So let's say 1 plus 2. It returns 3. Let's say let x equals to array 3, 4, 5. Then we got the answer. Now let's say show x. You see, so this is Node. You just download it, so you can have that run in terminal. Now I'm using it in Emacs, eShell, of course. And let's see, exit. Okay, Control D. Okay, let's just close it, kill it. Okay, so you want to download Node. The advantage of that is that it lets you, for example, you can open a new file and type in the file. Let's say I type 1 plus 2. I say console log. Console log 1 plus 2. Okay, and save the file as xx.js. Okay, so the file is saved as xx.js. Now I go to shell. Now I can type node, then space xx.js, enter. So it output 3. So that this is another way to run it. So the advantage of installing Node is so that you can run JavaScript against the file. But actually in browser you can actually do that. In browser, if you start up the tool, the tool is actually very complicated. There's huge amount of options. This is like today's modern browser with the JavaScript console. The whole thing is actually more advanced. I would say more advanced, more complicated than any typical IDE for C++ or Java or C Sharp. Okay, because JavaScript today is a huge business. It's also the number one programming language. So let me see. Yeah, so it's extremely popular, and that is the reason why you want to learn JavaScript. you know, that is the reason, because it's a good thing to learn a few languages. So JavaScript. So now you know how to run a program via the browser console log, or install the Node.js. Okay, once we know that, that's a big thing we have covered. Actually, I don't want to close that. Oh wait, okay, so now you know how to run the program via the browser or the Node binary. Now what's the next thing we're gonna talk about? Good morning, Abdurrahman. Abdurrahman Nadi. So what are the next thing? What's the next thing? Okay, now we know how to run the JavaScript program. You can either run it interactively in browser, or you can run it interactively using a node, or you can run it as a file. You know, using node. Now the next thing we want to do is to cover some basic language syntax of the JavaScript. I guess let's do that. But this part is rather very boring. Okay, so in next 5 minutes, let's cover some basics of JavaScript language syntax. Okay, so JavaScript language, it's a very dynamic language. It supports functional programming. I would say even more so, in some sense, even more so than Lisp, than Common Lisp, than Emac Lisp. Okay, I you know because JavaScript supports the feature where a function can be the argument to another function. A function can take a function as argument, argument input, and it can return a function in a clean way. Now, this very feature, just this feature, is a tremendous help in functional programming. It's almost the most fundamental critical feature of functional programming languages. So JavaScript is very much functional programming if you want. Okay, it also supports objects. Uh, and it's very dynamic. So in some sense, JavaScript is very much like Ruby. I would say Ruby and Python and Perl. Dynamic languages, as opposed to C, C++, C Sharp, Java. Those kind of languages where you have typically you have to compile, and typically you have a main section, like main. You don't have that in JavaScript. You just run it like a bash shell script. Let's go over some basic JavaScript syntax. Now not going to go over this in detail. You should read this part because it's kind of boring. So it shows you what comments, what's the syntax for comments, how do you print something into the screen, like print hello world, for example. You use console log. So I can now run this command, console run this file, and the result is 3. Let's say console log hello, run it, and I see the output. So that's how you print things in JavaScript. Then you have string syntax. The For example, the definition, let x equals to, let's say, love. Okay, then let's print x. Okay, run it, I get love. And I can also see if x is equal to the string love. Let's run it. It says true here. So that's how you print things. Then we have substring. Yeah, let me show you an example. String. So string, first of all, string can be double quote or single quote. That's a little bit detailed. Actually, that's not important. So anyway, so you have strings, then you have substrings. So let's do substring. So let's I love Earth. Let's say I love Earth. Okay, and that's a string. So let's say we want substring. So let's do x dot slice, starting from index 0 to, let's say, start from 0 1, from index 1 to index 4. Let's see what we get. Run it. We got lov. So let's say 1 to 5. Then we got love. So that's how you get a substring, from a string. So these are the basic syntax of JavaScript. Now I'm not going to go over them because they kind of boring, and if I go over them, you're gonna forget anyway. The only way you to learn is actually you have to start coding it. Then you have if then statements. Then you have loop, for loop. For loop is just like C or Java. Then you have array and object. Now array and object, that is becoming, starting to become very interesting. That is when we see that is actually beginning to be the things you want to learn about JavaScript. Okay, so we are going to, so let's see what to do next. Okay, let me check how many people I have watching. 4 people. So let me think. So far so good. This is going too slow. Let's think what to we're gonna talk about JavaScript. Yeah, let's just begin about some topic. We just talk about some topics. So array and object. Okay, first of all, so JavaScript. You learn. The syntax. You can just read this page later on. But let me start to talk about something interesting about JavaScript. That can get you begin to understand the language. So first of all, the most important thing is that the value types of JavaScript. Now JavaScript, every value has belongs to a type. So there are these types in JavaScript. You have undefined type, null type, boolean type, number type, symbol type, and object type. Uh, Variables. When you use variables in JavaScript, there is no type associated with variable names because JavaScript is dynamic. So you don't need to declare a variable to be a specific type, such as int, float, things like that. You don't have to. But any value, any number three, any string, any value uh, belongs to a type. So you have these one, two, three, four, five, six, seven types. Let me go over them. It's not too difficult to understand them all, and this is very important. This you have like memorize this part. Okay, so you have this undefined type. Now what? Let's say number. So what is a number type? Any value that is a number is belongs to number type. So 3 is a number, it's a number type. 3.2 is a number, it's a number type. And the one way to find out what type it is of a value is to use the type of operator. So let's say type of 3. Let's print it. It says a number. In fact, it actually returns a string. It returns a string, and the string says number. That is actually what it returns. So you see, we get true. So by the way, there is no float type. There's no int type. The JavaScript does not make a distinction of them. The language just have a number type. Now there's an undefined type. The only possible value of that type is the literal keyword undefined. So undefined, that's a value. So for example, we can run the program, we can console log undefined, run it. It just print undefined. Then if you say type of undefined, type of and check if it's equals to type of undefined returns a string undefined. It says true because that is the type of the literal value undefined. That is the only possible value, just the keyword undefined. So that's undefined type. In the same way, there's another literal keyword called null. That's it's like undefined. It's almost have the same meaning. So null is the only possible value for the null type. So you have undefined, you have null, you have true, and then you have Boolean type. Boolean type are the words keyword true and false. So if you run that, it returns true. So it's just the keyword true and false. You run it, it all returns true. So the literal keyword true and false are these values are of the type Boolean, called Boolean. And there are only two possible values of this type: the keyword true and false. So that covers about the special case: undefined type, null type, Boolean type. Okay, and then you have string type. String is any string. And symbol type is a bit complicated. The symbol type we don't have to worry about too much because that is introduced in 2015. A symbol type is basically a value that is not human readable, and that value basically is always unique. It the symbol type kind of function as an ID identifier. It's like a unique symbol, like it's not even a number. You cannot see, you cannot actually see the value. A symbol type is just a value that's kind of unique, and that's created in invented in 2015 for the purpose of creating properties so that other properties will not override it. That's basically the purpose of the symbol type. We'll talk about that. Probably not today. But anyway, the last type is object type. Object type is the most interesting. Notice that in all these types, you don't have a function, and you don't have the typical array or list. They are not here. They are actually all a subtype of the object type. Now, what's interesting here is that the JavaScript object, the types, they don't, JavaScript do not technically have the concept of a subtype. There's no such thing. You will not find it in a JavaScript specification, the ECMAS script, 2015, 16, 17. So there's no concept of subtype. But then, but arrays and functions and quite a few other things, they are all of the type object. So anyway, I'm kind of lost because I'm starting to kind of just like repeating, like almost like reading off a book, that saying things everyone already knows. That's what happens when I try to actually, formally teach something. On the other hand, if I'm ranting about something, you will learn a lot more things then. Anyway, so a lot more than what I'm doing now. But anyway, so let's go back. So you have these types in JavaScript. Okay, remember, the object type is the most complex. So what is the object type? Let's talk about object type. Object type is is basically the meaning. Basically, object type are a collection of key and value pairs. Plus, it has a special functionality. Like any value, when a value is an object, that almost always means it is a key and value pair. Now, when you use a type of operator, and when you say type of null, it will actually return object. You see, it is true. and this is bad because null is actually not a object type. This is one of the problem of the bug in JavaScript. Null is not, null, the type of null according to the spec is supposed to be null. Null is the only possible value for that type, null. But when you use type of operator on the null value, it actually returns the object, a string. It says it's object. So this is it's this way because it was a bug in the first implementation of JavaScript. Because when you go to and read this article from, linked from my website, you will see this guy. He's a JavaScript master. He dig into the origin why type of null, is object. It basically is just a bug in the C program, the implementation. So that's one of the problem of JavaScript. So what is object? Okay, I kind of get lost. I'm kind of like don't have a goal right now. Okay, let me just talk about objects. Okay, object. So object is key and value pairs almost always. And the syntax for the literal expression for object is like this. I'm gonna show you. So for example, let obj equals to this curly quote, and let's say x1 y2. Okay, this is the syntax, and we run it. And wait, we cannot. Oh, we missing a colon here. So we run it. It runs, and now we can print it. Obj, print the object, and it prints x1 and y2. So remember, by definition, object is just a collection of key value pairs, and typically the key value pairs, they are not ordered. They are not guaranteed to be ordered, but browser tries to order them. But anyway, so it's just a collection of key value pairs. Now every object, okay, then let me show you. So array, object is the primary data type in JavaScript, because like in other languages, you have array, you have list, you have hash table or dictionary, you have all these things. In JavaScript, that's just called object. By the way, the word object here is totally different from the object in the Java or Python sense. It's totally different from the object-oriented programming's sense of object. So JavaScript object. So let me tell. So object, you can have. For example, I can have a function that shows me all the keys of the object, key value. So I call the function reflect.onKeys, and let's say object here, and let's say print it, run it, and it gives me a array x and y, because x, y are the keys. So objects is a key and value pair, and the type for the keys, there are only two types allowed. One is string, and the other one is symbol. Symbol is complicated. Let's just talk about strings. So in this example, x and y are actually strings, even if you don't type them as like that, but they are automatically converted to strings. So key, the type of the key allowed is either a string or a symbol. The value can be anything. The value can even be a function. uh, so let me define a function then. Okay, so I'm kind of lost. I'm kind of lost. Like right now, I'm becoming goalless. I'm like, there's no specific thing in my mind I want to show you. And so, any questions? Like, like, what are you? Maybe you are, you've been watching this for 10 minutes. You are expecting me to say something, and you are, like, type it, type your opinion. Like, once I get, I have chat, I have people talking, and then I can talk about lots of these things. Um, JavaScript. So I'm thinking. So let's write a function. Let's print 1 to 100. Okay. So let's open a new window. Open a new window and save this window as xx2.js. Okay. Now let's print 1 to 100. Okay. So we're gonna do for loop. I equals to 0, I less than 100, and let's print it. I. Okay. Run it. Syntax error, unexpected token. Oh yeah, so here, run it, so we can see 1 to 100. Okay, let's say we just want even numbers. Now wait, let's say we want to put them into a list. So we let v ar is array. So we declare a empty array here. Ar is empty, and for when we do this, for I equals to 0 to less than 100, we want to ar dot push. Okay, then I. Okay, so each time it will add the number to the array. So now we do that, then we print ar. Okay, run it. You see we got an array here because this square bracket. Now let's say 10. You see we got an array here. Now array has a length. You type ar dot length. Okay, so console log printed. You can see 10 because there are 10 items. And let's define a function. So the way you define, there are many ways to define a function. One of the ways is the traditional by the keyword function. And you can, let's name the function f. So arguments x and return x plus 1. Okay, that's our function. Then we call it. Let's say f at 2. Return. We got 3. That's the answer. Correct. Another way to write a function is by arrow function. The syntax is like this. Constant arrow function. So I declare let me show you. So here's a function. The function will x plus 1. So here's a function. This function is usually called lambda or anonymous function. It doesn't have a name. It's just a function. So here is x plus 1. And if we run it, it runs. If we want to evaluate this function, let's say at the value of 2, you just do like the normal way. You put a bracket, parenthesis behind it, and 2 inside. So now you run it. It runs, but now you want to print the value. So let's say let r equals to that. Okay. Then console log. So now you got the number 3. So that's how you define a function. So there are two ways. One is by the keyword function, and the other way is by arrow function. Arrow function is much better. You should try to always use arrow function. if you prefer, if you want functional programming. So what we have done here is actually we assigned the result of a function to R, but we can also do it this way, constant error function. So here we so f equals to this anonymous function, and what that do is that let's say f2. Okay, so f2 equals to this function. Now we can call f2, and let's say put 2 there, run it, and we get 3. That's a result. That's good. So two ways to define. There are more than two ways, but the two primary practical way to define a function is by the keyword function or by arrow function. Okay, so that's about function, and we have a example of an array. Uh, we have shown a function example of function and example of array. What am I gonna do next? Um, so any questions so far? So let me think about the JavaScript functions and arrays. So I want to teach JavaScript, and so far I'm not doing a good job because um, kind of lost the purpose. But at least you learn how to evaluate, how to start to run JavaScript programs. You can do that in browser or via the node binary. Then you want to learn about the syntax of JavaScript, and the best way to do that, is just to read this page of my tutorial. You can spend like 20 minutes and you learn the basic syntax of printing, of string, of arithmetics, like 1 plus 2 or minus, multiply, division. Then you learn about assignments, like let z equals to 5. Assignment is important, it's critical. Then you also learn about numbers. Of course, numbers, numbers is everywhere. It's fundamental. Then there is a string and number conversion, because sometimes you want to turn a number into a string. Let's say you want to print 3.58. Usually it's done automatically, but sometimes you want to manipulate things. You turn a number into a string, and one way, and you can do that by just type the number dot parse float or number dot parse int. That's how you do it. But you see that function name involves a dot. Now I'm going to explain that later. You'll learn that when you get into objects and properties. But anyway, so you have these numbers. First of all, you understand numbers, and you can try this code: number and strings. Then you have variables. Now variables is also one of the fundamental element in programming languages. Variable allows you to store a value and use it later. So in JavaScript, in modern JavaScript, the way you declare a variable is using the let keyword. Let something, let x equals to 4, and things like that. That's how you declare variables. And when you have a let, the scope of a variable is uh, within the curly bracket. For example, let me show you an example. So another new file, save it xx3.js. So let's say let x equals to 3, but let's put it in a curly bracket. Okay, then we console log x. Okay, let's do this. So in a curly bracket we have x equals to 3, then we print it. Then outside of it we again print the value of x. Let's see what the result will be. It will be, make a guess, what the result will be. And I'm gonna show you what it is, like right now. Okay, so the result is actually an error because it says x is not defined. You see, because the second x is outside of the curly bracket. So when the curly bracket finishes, there's no more x. So x is actually local variable to the curly bracket. So in JavaScript, when you use let, the scope of the variable is within the curly bracket, the nearest outer curly bracket. And there is another keyword called constant, const, that has the same syntax as let. The only difference between constant, const, and let, is that when you use the constant to declare a variable, you can never change the value of the variable. In other words, you are defining a constant. So that's the two difference. Otherwise, let and the keyword constant are exactly the same. They have the same scope as well. Now there's another keyword called var in JavaScript. Var is a very old, keyword in JavaScript. Let and constant is new in JavaScript. In 2015, they added that. Now the keyword var is also for declaring a variable, but the behavior is very, very extremely complicated because it depends on how, whether you have assignment in conjunction when you declare a variable, or it depends on the placement of your variable declaration, or whether it's inside the function. The scope and availability of the variable changes, in a very complicated way. So basically, in modern JavaScript, the keyword var is considered obsolete. Like nobody uses it. It's one of the mistake of JavaScript. It's one of the most worst error, mistake, bad design in JavaScript. So, but today, if you code JavaScript, nobody ever uses it. It's considered obsolete. So I'm not going to go into the detail about why var is very complicated. Actually, that's a good topic to go into. Just to give this talk some flavor. So I mean, so I actually finally have something to talk about. The worst, one of the worst what of JavaScript. Why people hate JavaScript? Because var is the one of the biggest reason. There are so many reasons, but var is one of the biggest reason. But in modern JavaScript, you don't use it. Nobody uses. So Sean says, if you could explain more about Dom stuff, that would be super helpful. Okay, Dom. Okay, let's why not? Let's jump over to Dom. So I'm going to leave JavaScript the language for now because I'm just doing random talk. Like this is informal lecture. It's a talk show, you know. And so let's talk. So we're gonna drop JavaScript because I was just like repeating. I felt like repeating boring stuff. So let's talk about DOM. So because there's a question, then uh, you know. So let's go to DOM then. So anyway, so JavaScript the language, you can by the way, go to my website. I have this JavaScript in depth. You know, I bet I bet you money that I can see myself. I worked on this for 2 years. I read all the specs of JavaScript, very complicated specs. So I wrote this tutorial in 2 years. With I spent 2 years. So check it out, and you can learn. You will learn a lot. JavaScript basic in 1 hour. And if you spend few more hours, you will actually understand some of the extreme complexity of JavaScript, but explained in a very logical, clear way, such that even if you have, let's say, 2 years experience programming JavaScript in industry, you will learn. Actually, you will start to see when you read my tutorial. You will see finally you understand something. Because JavaScript is actually very convoluted language. So so you can check out my tutorial, and I want to mention that I'm selling it to pay for it as a commitment. You PayPal, you buy this tutorial, I send it to you. Uh, that is good. Do that. Very few people, vast majority of JavaScript programmers, I would say more than 50% in industry, even if you are working at big companies like Google, Facebook, I would say most JavaScript programmers, more than 50% of them, professional JavaScript programmers, they don't actually understand JavaScript the language too well. Okay, so because the JavaScript language is really complicated, there are lots of holes in the language. So anyway, let's talk about DOM then. So DOM is the technology that allows you to use JavaScript to program websites. So what? So if you go to my DOM tutorial, you will the first section, web scripting overview. There are about 6 pages that gives you an overview how DOM is used, what it is, how do you use it, what kind of environment, like what's going on, like what do you have to know, what are the things you need to know. That's an overview. So first of all, DOM is just a everything about DOM is in the browser. Okay, DOM stand for Document Object Model. DOM was invented in 1996 or so, 1998, about 1999. Okay, it was invented there. Back then, the expectation is entirely different from today. So DOM is very kind of old Asian tech, and it's pretty bad in many ways because in the beginning, nobody knows what they are really trying to do. But anyway, we are stuck with the word DOM, Document Object Model. But anyway, the most practical thing in DOM about scripting website is that you go to the console log and you will see this window object. Type window. Okay, enter. Now that is the object in JavaScript. Now let me explain how JavaScript relates to DOM. How technically are they related together? So JavaScript is a language. Technically, it's called a hosted language. Hosted language. Now this is a very different concept from C, Java, Python, Ruby. Okay, those are not hosted language. JavaScript is a hosted language. That means how JavaScript behave depends on what is the environment. I mean, in the spec, there's this thing. Uh, but the most practical way to understand is that JavaScript, in the JavaScript language. Now remember, we said JavaScript has objects. One of the type of a value is called object. Now in JavaScript, every object by definition have a link to another object called its parent. Okay, may or may not have, but it may. So every object may have a parent and only one parent, and that object again, it may have one parent, only one parent. So all the objects that exist in JavaScript, so they have these parents. Eventually some object doesn't have parent, then that's kind of, you can say it's dead. So some object, eventually you come into this parent object. Good morning, Daniel. So you have this parent object in JavaScript. That parent object is object prototype. uh, uh, Object prototype. uh, okay, that this object prototype is the root object of all the standard built-in JavaScript uh, objects. Okay, but what is the parent of object.prototype? Now that depends on the environment. Okay, so that is the meaning of hosted language. Now by spec, the environment of the parent of object.prototype in a browser is the window object, represented by the keyword window. So you can say, for example, you can type of window, and it return object telling you what it is object. You can say window dot length 0. Oh, because it's not an array. Yeah. So window is the object, and now you want to know how many how many number of keys are in a window object. You can say so let's go to JavaScript. Let's go to let's go to JavaScript properties, list properties. So object.keys. So let's go back to JavaScript. Object. Oh, you got it right. Okay, object keys. So window. And so the browser shows there are 209 items. 209 items. Then we can say object.keys window, then dot length, because length is a property of array. So it shows you 209 items. So my point here is that in a browser, window is the global root object, and every JavaScript object, including the object prototype, is part of is a children of window. So for example, we can say window dot object dot prototype. That is a object. We press enter. It actually shows you the object, and we can say object dot keys of window dot object dot prototype. It returns the array. Yeah. So hosted language. So in a browser, you have the root of all everything of the JavaScript language, every keyword, every object, there is a root that is the window word. Okay, uh, and that thing is called the global object. Now, when I'm in Emacs right now, I'm in Emacs. I don't have, in Emacs when I run this script, it's actually running the not binary. So in the not environment, the global object is not window. That's why it's called hosted language. It depends on the environment. So for example, if I say console log window, it will complain, reference error, window is not defined. So in Node.js, the global object, the parents of everything else, is this keyword represented by this keyword global. I think. Let's try it. You see, it runs. You see, it returns. So we are printing global, and it returns this humongous list. That is the global object in the Node.js environment. Now, and we can also try the same thing. Like we can try global dot object dot prototype, and that will print that object, because the object dot prototype is a child, is a property of the global object. You can see it also prints out 250 lines. So window. So now in browser, in browser, just remember everything is part of the window. That that gives you the whole JavaScript kind of like the JavaScript language, as far as object is concerned. So you have the window environment. Another one critical to understand is the document object. Now that is actually Windows start document. When people talk about DOM, that's when you want to how to insert a HTML element on a web page, how to remove a HTML element, how to change things, change text, rotate graphics, some 3D object. You want to rotate it by and the 3D image are represented by HTML elements. Of course, everything on the web is represented by HTML or XML elements. So when you do these kind of things, you want to manipulate these elements. All those methods are from this object called DOM. It's called document object, and the way you access that is window.document. So the keyword, the string document is actually a property of the window object. So window document. And there's another interesting thing about the window object, because the word window, the keyword window is the global object. So oftentimes you do not need to type it. You can just, for example, let's start a console log. Let's say window dot document. Okay. Now that's a object. You can see, this is the object, and it has lots of properties and keys. And if you try document without a window, it returns the same thing. Now you can say window dot document triple equal and enter. It'll say true, because window keyword that's a global variable. You oftentimes you do not, always you do not need to mention, you do not need to type the window dot something. You can directly just use the properties of the window object. So that is about the idea where everything is within the window object. Everything is just the children of the window object. And the other important thing is the window dot document is the DOM thing that you deal with. So that's okay. So let's go to the next topic about web scripting. So DOM is about manipulating HTML elements, and it's represented by the window keyword or window dot document. Now the next thing you want to understand is that when you programming a browser, everything is event based. So what is an event? Like when you do a mouse click or button click or type on keyword, those are event. Or even if you move a window, that's also an event. So events. So those are events. And in JavaScript, you can when so when you click a mouse, move the mouse, everything typing or uh, clicking, everything is an event. Now you can attach a function to an event. So when that event happens, your function will be called. Now this is the primary way. This is basically the only way to write any sort of interactive application. When you have an application, of course, users, type in numbers, a spreadsheet or a calculator or whatever, you need user interactive interaction with user. So that's called event-based programming. So in JavaScript, in the browser specifically, everything, these mouse movements, keyboards, changing window size, switching window, switching tabs, all these, everything, every activity is an event. You can attach functions to any one of them. This is the way you control the interaction between your application and the user. And the way you add a function to an event is like this. I have an example here. For example, in this example, we define text equals to document get element by ID. So remember, document is the object. So get element by ID is a key. In JavaScript, you have the concept of objects, and objects are key value pairs, collection of key value pairs. So in the case of the document object, it has a key named get element by ID, and this key, the type of this key is a string. So the way you access this key's value is by document dot get element by ID. So we can show you here. So let me show you some of the examples of the thing. So I think I'm kind of repetitive, but anyway, you type document dot get element by ID, it returns a function because the document object has a key which is a string named get element by ID, and the value of this key, this property, is a function. What does this function do? This function actually, get element by ID, grab a element from the HTML web page and return a object that represents that elements. Then you can manipulate that elements, things like that. So, but so I'm trying to reinforce the idea of the object key value pairs. Get element by ID is actually just a property name, which is a string, which is a property of the document object. By the way, in Java, there's an important thing in JavaScript. Every object is a key value pairs collection of, and the value of keys can be possible types are string or symbol. Vast majority of the time they are just string keys. So a document, you have these properties, key value pairs. They are called properties of the object. Every object may have these properties which are just key value pairs. Now, by definition, an object can also have a parent object, meaning there's a link to another object, and the other object is meant to be, we call it the parent object. Now, the parent and children relationship of objects is entirely different from the relation of a object and its properties. Now, this is important because the JavaScript dot notation is kind of confusing. So when you see document dot get element by ID, now this syntax is a syntax of property access. This syntax means the document object has a property whose key is a string get element by ID. Okay, it does not mean the document has, object has a children called this object get element by ID. It does not mean that at all. So keep this in mind because this will get very confusing when you try to understand the parent and children relation between objects. So let me summarize in another way. In JavaScript, when you see a.b.c or something, those dot means only one thing. It means whatever appears on the left is the object, and whatever appears on the right is the property name of that object. Remember this. This is very, very different from Java or Python. In Java or Python, when you have a.b.c, the first a.b means A is the parent of B class. Then in the B class, you have a property called C. So that's JavaScript. That's Java. But in JavaScript, the dot only means one thing. That is the property, between an object and the property key name. Okay, let me read the comments a little bit. So it seems obvious now that you said it. Okay, good point about hosted language. So in JavaScript, there is always a single global object defined that is always available in a web browser. The global object is the browser window, represented by the keyword window. Yes. And Danielle says, any global variables or function can be accessed as property of the window object. That is true. Actually, that is not true for a variable declared with let. Okay, I'm nitpicking because that's another complexity of JavaScript. So for example, let's say var x equals to 3. Now we just declared a variable x equals to 3. Now let's show x. So x is 3. Now let's say let's magnify a little bit. Now let's say window dot x. You see, it also says 3. Now let's say window dot x equals to x. It says true. You see, so when you declare a variable, global variable with the keyword var, that variable automatically becomes the property of the global object. In the browser, that's the window object. But this is not true when you have a variable declared with the let keyword. So for example, let y equals to 4. Okay. Now let's say y, we got 4. Now let's say window dot y, it says undefined. You see, so when you declare a variable with var, which is the obsolete construct, we don't use that anymore. It's bad. When you declare a variable with var, that variable name automatically becomes a property key of the global object. In the browser, that is the window object. You can do the same in a Node.js. For example, let's try Node.js. Let var x equals to 3, then global dot x, we print that. Then we also print global dot x equals to x. then we let's try that. Oh, it says oh, we have to do it this way, I think. Now it's false. Well, I'm not gonna I'm gonna I'm not going to well, what, so why is it what why in not JS the variable does name does not attach to the global object as a property? Well, the reason is basically there's no good reason. This is one of the reasons JavaScript is very complex. But anyway, let's read some more comments. Query selector. So Sean says, what about query selector? So query selector is a element of the Windows of the document object. So let me show you some of the for example, uh, window dot has own property. Okay, then we call that and we say document. Okay, you can see, so that means document is a property of Windows, its own property. Now let's say document dot has own property, and let's give a string query select. uh, did I type it right? Query selector. Okay, no. Okay, so let's go to my Dom scripting. Get element by ID, tag name, class, CSS. So go down, you have query selector. Okay, now let's go to the console again. Query selector. So document does not have the property query selector. So uh, so let's find out what is query selector. Type of query selector. Okay, then it says undefined. Let's try type of document dot query selector. It says a function. Now, so query selector is a property of document. So let's try document has own property query selector. Why is it return false? Let's see. So let's go back to JavaScript in depth. Let's go to the properties section. Let's go to property existence section. So we have object has own property. So we are trying to find out where does the query selector come from. So we know document.querySelector is a function. Let's try a different syntax for array access. So document Okay, so document, it looks like document. Okay, so query selector, it might be a property of the window object. I think that's true. So let's try it. Window dot has own property, parenthesis, query selector, false. Document dot has own property, false. Okay, now here's a puzzle. So what is the query selector function came from? Now it is a function. Now we know in JavaScript, a function, almost every built-in, a function is the type of a function is object, because in JavaScript there's actually no type called function. Everything is, we talked about before, so it's an object. So but in JavaScript every object may have a parent, and basically most, every standard built-in function or browser stuff, they almost always have a parent. Now our problem is to find out what is the parent object of query selector. So maybe that will be help us, study JavaScript. So the process of trying to find that out. So we want to find out. So first of all, we know document.querySelector type of is a function. So apparently document.querySelector returns a value that is a function object. So is query selector a property of document? So another way to do that is we do reflect. We are getting false result here. That's possibly because there's a complexity in the property inheritance stuff. So what I'm going to do is going to call the method reflect.apply, which takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the function we want. The function we want is we want to find out what's the parent of the query selector. So first of all, so we can go to the no, wait, hold on a second. There's two confusing things going on. One is to find out the parent of the document.querySelector function, that function object. Because it's an object, it has a parent. So that's one thing we want to find out. The other thing is the query selector string is a property of some object. We want to find out what object that is. Two different things. This is important. This is where confusion begins. Because you can see that we are starting to get confused. So first of all, the first goal I want to do is to find out which object has the property query selector. Okay, which object has the property query selector? And to do that, let's go to the JavaScript in-depth property section. Property existence. I'm surprised that has own property does not work. Let me try it. Has own property. Okay, let's go to has own property. So object.prototype has own property. So what are we doing here? We are calling the object.prototype. We are calling the reflect apply function, and we give it 3 elements. The first argument is the function we want to call. We want to call the function object.prototype has own property. Then we want to give it a value that will be used as the this keyword in the function. In the function object.prototype has own property. Then we want to pass an argument that is actually the argument for the function object prototype has own property. So let's evaluate that in browser and see what we got. Paste, evaluate, false. So query selector is not a property of document, and is a property of Windows. Then let's try it. False. Query selector is not a property of window. Actually, this might be difficult to find the answer, because so anyway, let me read the comments. Good morning, Norman. Good morning, Osiper. Okay, so good morning, Danielle. Danielle says the let statement declares a block scope local variable. That's correct. But however, when you don't have a block scope, that let is global scope. When you say let x equals to 3, you in your source code without any outer curly bracket, then that variable is global variable. Yeah, reflect has returns if you call reflect has with 2 arguments, document and the query selector string, it returns true. What that means is that query selector is a property, is in the property chain of the document object. That's what reflect.has function do. That's what it means. It means the query selector string is a property key name in either the document object's own property, or document object's parents objects, or that object's parents object. Basically, when reflect.has returns true, it means the property exists in the prototype chain, but it does not tell you which object actually has the property query selector. We can find it out though, because we have tried. We know that it is in the document prototype chain, but however, we also know it is not a property of window object, nor is it a property of the document object. So where does it come from? But we do know it is in the prototype chain. So between Windows and document, and we also know document is a property of Windows, because let's see, Windows has own property document, document, it returns true. So document is a property of Windows. Okay, so now remember again, there's this confusion. There's one concept about an object and its property. An object and its property. The other concept is about an object and its children objects. So we want to find out where is query selector came from. We know it is in the prototype chain of the document object, in the prototype chain of document object. So what is the parent of the document object? That is a question, and let us find out. What is the parent object of the document object? Okay. So in order to find out the parent, you can go to JavaScript tutorial. You go to object property, you go to object inheritance, you go to prototype chain, you go to find object's parent. So there are these ways you can find a object's parents. So let's use reflect get prototype of. So reflect get prototype of and document. So let's do that. Oh, okay. So now we are getting somewhere. You see, so now let's not be confused. Remember, the document object is actually window.document. So the window object has a property of string key, and that string is document. So window object has a property named document. Okay, and the value of this property is the document object. Okay, that's another object. And the parent of this object, document object, is this HTML document prototype. Okay, we can see here. So this is how we begin to understand the kind of complexity. So the parent of the document object is actually this HTML document prototype. Okay, now I believe one of the property of this object is the query selector. Let's try it. HTML document prototype. Can you actually refer to it? You cannot even refer to it because I think it's internal. But we can still get its value by using let's say reflect dot, let's say this, let x equals to reflect dot get prototype of document. So right now x is basically the parent object of the document object. Now let's say x dot has own property, and now let's try query selector false. Okay, then let's try reflect let's try to find out the parent of x. So reflect dot get prototype of x. Okay, then we got document prototype. Okay, so let's assign that to y. Let's say x w. So let's say w. Let w equals to reflect dot get prototype of x. Okay, then w is this thing. Now let's try w dot has own property query selector. True. There it is. We found the object that has the property key query selector, and the value of this property is the query selector function. Okay, so I think I'll stop here about this today, kind of JavaScript tutorial. So I mean, in the past 10 minutes or 20 minutes, we have covered this one of the most complex thing about JavaScript. That is the confusion between a object and its property, key and value. Property key. That's a relation. You have an object. It has properties. Each property is represented by a key string, usually a string. Then this value, it has a value. The value is often typically another object. Okay, so properties and its keys. Now, a second important concept is each object may have another object that linked together. We call them parent and child. So any object, so that implies a parent may have another parent, and so on. So these are two concepts that are often confused together. Now let me just summarize again. Repeat that in JavaScript, when you see a.b.c, that dot always means a relation between a property on the left side, a object on the left side. On the right side is the key of a property, the key name, almost always a string. Okay, so when you have a.b.c, that means b is a property of a and c is a property of b. They have no meaning, absolutely nothing about the relationships between the object A, B, C. Okay, B's parent can be anything. B's parent can be F. C's parent can be H. Something. So today, let's say this is important thing to remember about the thing I'm talking about, and we have shown an example because we are trying to find where does this query selector came from. We know that we can say document.query selector. It gives us it says a function. So the value of this property key query selector is a object. It's a function. Then there are two questions. One is that this function, which is the parent of this function. The other question is which object actually hold the property key called query selector. So we have tried to look into both ways, and we have found out that the object that actually holds the property key query selector is this document prototype thing. That's internal in the web browser. That's internal in the web browser. Probably, that itself is probably a property of Windows, object. So we are getting, you see these things, this thing is not typical. You ask a typical JavaScript programmer who works in a company for 2 years, they do not know. You show them this, it's 50% of these programmers, there's a good chance that they've never seen this object HTML document prototype. We are seeing them because we are trying to dig into the JavaScript language in depth. In practice, you never run into this kind of thing, like the parents, where things came from. Anyway, that I hope that is some kind of useful information. And I was rambling a lot. So that concludes today's talk show about this JavaScript. So part of the reason I'm doing this is I'm I'm getting for myself. I'm practicing how to articulate some subjects such as JavaScript ideas in real time without preparation and present it smoothly. So I'm learning for myself the ability to teach JavaScript in real time without preparing, because JavaScript script I know it pretty well. So I'm honing on this skill of live presentation. So that's a benefit for myself. So let me read the comments, and that's about it today. So Danielle made some comments. So Danielle apparently is a expert in JavaScript as far as I've seen. Danielle's comment. He knows what is he knows the stuff. Uh, property of not object. Thanks. Okay. So thank you guys for coming. That's it for today. Yeah. So I have all this written out in a much more clear fashion in my JavaScript in depth. So if you like it, tell your friends. Buy the tutorial. Thank you very much. Bye bye.